So Joker 2, aka Joker Folie Deux, has got to be the biggest definition of a disappointing movie, as the first one was just so beloved and it performed so well both from a box office perspective as well as from an awards perspective. And so the second movie just had so much high anticipation. And I just feel like ultimately the creators behind the scenes just gave the biggest middle finger to the superfans of the movie. Now, IndieWire has reported that this was all purposeful, as it was never intended for Arthur Fleck to be such a pedestalized character. And I get that, of course, he's done some awful things and he's in jail for a reason, and they don't want that kind of behavior to be acceptable. But the end result is that they just totally tore down this character and just made the Joker such a laughingstock, and the character of Arthur Fleck to ultimately be such a loser that you're not really rooting for at all. And it is ultimately just really, really tragic. And like I said, if that was the intention, then fair enough, maybe there was some Shakespearean thinking in terms of a character that has just been so emotionally and physically abused his entire life. Firstly, there's never changes, but ultimately it just leads to his defeat. And they just completely destroyed everything that they had set up in the first movie, which is so disappointing, as the first movie you could see as a bit of a work of art in terms of really focusing on the people that are really looked down upon, the downtrodden in life, and what happens when, you know, one day they actually snap and they just have had enough. Is the message of Joker 2 that actually these people should stay at the bottom, they've got no chance of rising to the top? In a weird way, it feels like this movie is made for the haters of the first movie and not for the fans of the first film. And like I said, if you ultimately wanted to depict Arthur Fleck as a bit of a character that you should not be rooting for, I feel like they could have done it in such a better way than what they did do in this movie. And all of the musical numbers were just so frustratingly annoying in this film, and I feel like unfairly all of the blame for that is going to go on Lady Gaga, which I think is unfair, as I feel like the Harley Quinn character in this movie was actually really, really interesting, as of course firstly they flipped the traditional abuse happening from Joker to Harley, this time actually being from Harley to Joker, in terms of manipulating and abusing this character into doing everything that she wants him to do, and then ultimately deciding not to be with him when he is in the depiction of what she wants him to be, but we'll come back to that later. But as far as the musical numbers are concerned, usually these take place when a big crescendo moment happens and the musical number just adds so much, but annoyingly in this film it just dragged away from the storyline that you're watching, and so you just want the musical number to be over as soon as possible so that you can continue watching the storyline. So I just feel like from a structural perspective this film was just so bad. So they're kind of punishing the fans that made the first movie so successful, as they're like, oh god, we never intended for it to be such a pedestalizing, idol worshipping type of film in terms of just viewing the Joker as this savior, and so wanted to change that view into something really negative, and so ultimately just made him into a sad loser. And so if you look at the life of Arthur Fleck, it's actually incredibly devastating, as like I said, he was abused pretty much his entire life, both emotionally and physically. So he was never able to grow up, and so when he acts out and finally gets some recognition and praise for this, he then is able to realize and recognize that everything that he did do was incorrect, which I think is really, really brilliant, the fact that he's able to recognize this and then is seeking redemption and forgiveness. But the way in which he came to this conclusion, like I said, was just so horrific, as it effectively was from more sexual abuse. And then when you think he's kind of found himself in the Joker character, actually he then wants to revert back to Arthur Fleck, and then gets rejected once again because when he was Joker he was finally accepted. So I just feel like from the storyline, from a psychosis point of view, you can see why this character then right at the end, after the Gotham courtroom explosion, this character does not want to return back to Joker. And Harley Quinn, a number of people in the courtroom case, and maybe the public at large as well, are just not interested in Arthur Fleck. They are just so fascinated by the Joker character. So when he's said on public national TV that he's Joker no more, of course they're just going to walk out on him. Now the original ending was going to see Harley Quinn saying, look, if you're not going to be the Joker anymore, then I want to have nothing to do with you, which he does do, but after this, she is the one that actually kills the Joker, and then the police take her into jail, and then she kind of would have become the future Joker. But instead, they went down one of the fan theory routes that the traditional Joker would have been inspired by Arthur Fleck's Joker, which we definitely do see in Arkham Asylum right at the end of the film. I think this film looks at adoration in a really interesting way, as Arthur Fleck has never been adored by anyone, and then when he put on the mask of the Joker, this is when he gets the adoration, both by his followers in the outside world as well as in jail as well. And so then when he is able to re-find the Joker, he is then able to speak his mind and speaks out against the guards, but then they ultimately just bully and destroy and abuse him into submission. And when they kill off one of his biggest fans in jail, this literally was the thing that broke the camel's back for him. And so then when he gives up the mantle of Joker, not only does everybody reject him in the courtroom and most likely in the outside world as well, also he gets rejected in jail, which, like I said, this then leads into the traditional Joker being formed, which I do actually think is a lot more DC aligned. It does kind of seamlessly follow into the traditional Joker Batman storyline. Apparently after the first couple of trailers were released for Joker 2, Joaquin Phoenix was getting a little bit jealous that Lady Gaga was getting so much attention for her portrayal as Harley Quinn, and so he requested and demanded, apparently, I don't know if this is true, so many scenes to be removed of her. So I feel like a lot of the manipulation that Harley Quinn would have done to this character are just nowhere to be seen in this film. I think it's interesting the film poses the question, is the Joker really a split personality within Arthur Fleck? But I feel like this film answers that in terms of showing it's absolutely not. He created this persona unintentionally and didn't realize or recognize that it was going to kind of take a life of its own and be so much bigger. Then when he kind of felt that responsibility is far too much for him, he then just took the mask off and just completely rejected that persona. I thought that the explosion in the courtroom case was the most Batman that this film ever felt. And it was really great actually being back in Gotham City after Arthur Fleck then gets out of jail, as pretty much this entire movie was just a jail and courtroom based film. But it was really cool to see the outside world and also to see other people dressed as Joker, and then one guy really does take Arthur Fleck under his shoulder even though he's seen that he's rejected the mantle. But Arthur Fleck didn't want this, as he was just so obsessed and in love with Harley Quinn, but she didn't want to have anything to do with him, as she was just really not interested in Arthur Fleck at all, but was just so fascinated and obsessed with Joker. I thought Harvey Dent was alright, but I feel like they definitely could have given this character so much more depth, and it's just ultimately incredibly disappointing, as Joker 2 could have been an absolutely incredible sequel, but instead it is now a brand new low for DC, both in terms of a cinema score perspective as well as from a Rotten Tomatoes perspective, both from a critics and audience point of view. And whilst this movie definitely did have some interesting moments in there, the final product is just an absolute joke. And I just think a really cautionary tale of how you really should be careful and really focus and really think about who your actual audience are. And so for all of those reasons, I'm going to give Joker 2, aka Joker Folie Deux, a 2.5 out of 10. Now I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of this film? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.